We've all been there. You're sitting and watching infomercials and you suddenly see the simplest product for sale. And you think to yourself, geez, why didn't I think of that? I'm Jake, the Voice Parr, and these are 10 simple ideas that made millions. It seems ridiculous that it took so long for someone to realize that maybe people didn't want to have to wait until Thanksgiving or Christmas in order to chance their luck with a wishbone. Ken Aroni was the man who thought to make plastic wishbones available year-round. Who would have thought that people would want to buy a toy that was made of plastic and could only be used once? Not to mention that they cost $3.99 a packet. Yet, so they did. In their millions, which is how much Aroni was able to eventually sell his business for. Now that is one lucky entrepreneur. Who hasn't come across a Slinky in their lifetime? The coil-like contraption that literally slinks around the world thanks to the simple laws of motion and gravity is one of the biggest selling toys in the world. It was invented by Richard James, a naval engineer who was inspired one day in 1943 when a spring he was holding accidentally fell to the ground and seemed to stroll along the floor. Literally hundreds of millions of Slinkies have sold to date, which has made the James family $250 million. All that from a simple spring coil. Swiss electrical engineer Georges de Mestral went walking one day in 1948 with his dog in the woods. He became fascinated by the prickly burrs that clung onto his clothes and the fur of his dog. He realized that he could replicate the hooks and loops of a burr by using synthetic materials like nylon. He named the new material Velcro, which is a combination of the words velours and crochet, which are French for velvet and hooks. It was NASA that made Velcro a hit, and today, Velcro generates $100 million a year. That's a nice walk in the woods. The 1970s was a time of crazy fashion, crazy hairstyles, and some really crazy fads. But few fads were crazier in that era of bell-bottoms and platform shoes than pet rocks. It was the brainchild of Gary Dahl, who hit on the idea of placing a small polished rock nestled on some turfs of hay in a small box. The gimmick was that a pet rock was the perfect pet. It didn't need to be fed, walked, bathed, or groomed, and it would never misbehave, become ill, or die. His crazy gimmicky idea made Gary Dahl $15 million, and that's in 1970s dollars. The Snuggie is the epitome of that item that one sees being advertised and that seems so incredibly obvious. Yet someone had to think of how a blanket could also double as a warm wraparound piece of clothing. And that person was Scott Boylan. The sleeved blanket Snuggie brand became a pop culture phenomenon during the winter of 2008 and 2009, largely thanks to late-night infomercials and celebrity endorsements. 20 million of them sold in the first year, so one can imagine just how wealthy Mr. Boylan became thanks to Snuggies. Is there anything more annoying than not being able to get those last globs of ketchup out of the bottom of a bottle? How simple then to invent a valve that would allow a bottle to be kept upside down and allow its contents to be easily dispensed and not converged at the very bottom. That is exactly what Paul Brown did in 1991. Companies as diverse as NASA, shampoo manufacturers, and, yes, Heinz, the ketchup makers, immediately snapped up his niftily designed bottles. Brown was able to sell his design rights for $14 million. That's how to become a millionaire, one little squeeze at a time. What woman wouldn't want to wear an undergarment that could smooth out all her bumps and actually flatten her figure? It seems so obvious, which is what Sarah Blakely thought about her invention when she named Spanx. However, she would be rejected by manufacturer after manufacturer until eventually the folks at Neiman Marcus liked what they saw. Blakely's perseverance and belief in her product, not to mention the vanity of women all over the world, paid off. Today, her company is valued at over $1 billion, all thanks to some nifty hosiery for ladies. Making lists and short notes as reminders is something that people do all the time, every day. It was genius for someone to think of making small notepads that have pages that can be peeled off and stuck anywhere. It was also so obvious. Arthur Fry and Spencer Silver were the two guys from 3M who invented Post-it notes. Fry came up with the idea of the adhesive glue so that notes could be stuck to his hymn book during choir practice. And Post-its initially came out in yellow because that was the only color paper that stockroom had. Those little Post-its have made millions for 3M since being launched in 1980. Earl Dickinson had a wife who was a disaster in the kitchen, constantly cutting and burning herself while cooking. It motivated Dixon, who worked for Johnson & Johnson, to invent a bandage with an adhesive strip in 1920. The company was so impressed with the new product that they soon began mass-producing them. Band-Aids have become a part of people's lives and medicine cabinets for decades now. In 2001, Johnson & Johnson declared that they had sold over 1 billion Band-Aids, all thanks to a wife who was a klutz in the kitchen. Possibly the only thing that is more ubiquitous than a box of Band-Aids in a home is a box of Kleenex tissues. Nothing comes in handier than a Kleenex when someone has a cold or simply needs to wipe up something. Kleenex tissues were initially invented in 1924 as disposable face towels for ladies to remove makeup and creams from their faces. However, they really took off as a product when rebranded as disposable tissues that could prevent the spread of colds and make hay fever a little more bearable. Today, the Kleenex name alone is valued at over $3 billion. The invention of disposable tissues. Was there a simpler idea than that? Those then are 10 of the simplest ideas that went on to make millions. For more top lists just like this, be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Don't forget to check out our other top lists. Thank you very much for watching, and thanks for learning.